right. Hello. So today I'm going to go into some of the initial work and thinking that I did before really diving in and writing uh, Rockstar Widow. So time travel back, it's 2021. And one of the things to know is that the title didn't exist yet. So basically, we're dealing kind of a working title of Grief the Musical, even though at that stage there were other musicals out there that had similar titles. So one of the first things that I did in talking to um, Paulette and working with the book was to go and to start a list of um, locations, scenes, like everything that we could kind of brainstorm. So I'm going to share that with you here. Hopefully, this is all going to work. I'll go back and look at it to make sure. Um, but so let's see. So hopefully, you can see this. So what I started with was really this idea of okay, maybe it's an Evita like structure. Um, to kind of go into that. If you watch Evita, the musical version, there's a framing device. There's um, the Che character who's kind of our guide and narrator through it. So something like that. The other thing about it is it's got a couple of big leaps in years, uh, and that's kind of built into the structure of it. So I was considering something like that. Maybe if we open with an epilogue, maybe a big ensemble number, dancing, joy, even wrote a version of that um, with a song that's still hanging around in the show called Celebrate Life. Um, but also with a meta aspect. The film version of Evita, there's the funeral. Maybe we have a narrator. We started out with a coach that Paulette had worked with as a possible character. I'll come back to that. Um, we started looking at well, what were the things that were there for her at kind of the beginning stages of that journey? Things like, well, I want my life and husband back. We looked at scene and location possibilities, getting out of bed reluctantly, getting calls in the morning. She did this thing where a friend called her every day for a long period of time. uh, the coach Armand saying, "Hey, your life isn't over. That's a lie." Um, she took a prominent trip to Liverpool. Thought that was an interesting possible story piece. The Y, that means the 92nd Street Y, that also figured heavily in her life then. Subways, interesting because as I go through these, it's interesting to see what's still in play. But for the subways, she had a fear of the subways. She lived on the Upper East Side and walked or took the bus to most places, so she wasn't really comfortable with the subways at this point. And so that was a possible scene idea as well. Driving, learning to drive. She was, as with a lot of people around the country, don't probably realize this, but a lot of New Yorkers, especially if they're born and bred, they grew up in New York City, a lot of them don't learn to drive um, until some at all and some until later. So driving was something that she took on later in life. Um, Going to the beach, Department of Buildings. One of the big things that she accomplished in real life was she got the permits to renovate her apartment. And I'll come back to that, but that involved going to the Department of Buildings, which is a pretty intimidating place, and really being unstoppable and having conversations until she got the permits that she needed. Tennis, obviously you know, her husband in real life died playing tennis. So I started playing with the idea of, well, how does tennis figure into the story? Hospital, obviously a story about death and grief. You had a lot of opportunity for that. She had a very influential and incredible rabbi, so that was a possible story point. We knew we wanted to include date scenes because one of the things that happened is she started trying to date again, and uh, it went how a lot of dating goes, ups and downs. Um, Pasta restaurant dress ripping. I don't really remember dress ripping, so that's interesting. Bereavement group. She went to various widows groups, and we've got a pretty prominent uh, couple of scenes that use that now. But that was one of the early things we brainstormed. Um, and then let's see. So then kitchen counter, wine bar, breakfast counter. Those were various places that figured prominently. New Year's Eve, Central Park, Marathon. She worked as a volunteer on the New York Marathon and had some interesting stories from that. Um, Plastic surgeon. Um, this is a friend of mine who I was toying around using as a character model and it sort of incorporated it in some ways. And then House on Madison Avenue. She went to early on. She went to a party at a very ostentatious swank apartment, and met the first of the three guys that she dated, and that we kind of focus on in fictionalized versions in this. Um, she learned, she kind of dove into her interest in making art. Both her um, husband and her mom were artists and actually quite good. So we, explored incorporating that in. Um, had some ending ideas. Um, let's see. So I can't call people. I'm a widow. Widows don't just call people up and ask for dates. We looked at some of the boundaries, some of the dynamics. She was a ballerina in childhood. Um, the let's see. People actually called her Rockstar Widow, which was where the title originated, even though it didn't become the show title until much later. Um, so these are just various ideas. So we did a lot of brainstorming. Then we looked at, we talked through shows that she likes. Obviously, Hamilton was a big inspiration for it, even though there's not a lot in the show that's really reminiscent of Hamilton, but that was part of what inspired her, so it was worth talking about. At some point, everybody stopped coming to visitors, so it was like at that point the I guess the morning's over, nobody else is coming around, but then that was something new to deal with. We talked about various songs, and this list ended up expanding a lot because we started looking at pop songs. We started looking at a lot of Beatles, a lot of 70s, late 60s rock, and kind of looking at them as models. We talked about the old way to grieve, and there were some scenes that started evolving out of that old way to lead to grieve. Um, there's we grief the musical, like menopause the musical or golf the musical. Um, let's see, Grease the musical. um, and then I would ask various questions too, about things, dig into things, recurring aspects, defibrillators, the coach, condolences that were just really horrible. Things like, one of the things that came up was, somebody would say to her, well, at least he's in a better place. And she had a great reaction, was like, no, where he was with me was great. It was fine. He's not in a better place. And obviously people mean the world as a whole, but yeah, if you think about that, that's kind of like it's good. You could totally see that as a kick in your teeth. I started playing with how to compress time, all the different things. But you can see there's a lot of notes, and all of this is before I'm ever writing at all. Um, we talked about what a review would entail and how that would be different. Um, we started talking about it's really the whole new way to grieve, which the book is based on, really had a lot to do with the language around grief and how that works. And so we're really like, okay, well, how does that translate into a musical? Um, she radically downsized her life, which was a big deal. Um, there's obviously there was one of the things that came up there was a lot in real life for her son to deal with. He was at an age where he was going into college, and so there was the whole world of that. I ended up with the story leaning into that a lot and using a lot of fictionalizing of it. There's a lot of stuff that we went for that's more dramatic in the show than in real life in some ways. And I think anytime you're adapting real life, someone's story, you do have to, a lot of times, unless they were like Frank Sinatra or uh, uh, Scarlett O'Hara or something like that, people that had, dramatic lives. If they had a lot of drama in their lives, you might not have to do that at all. But if you're uh, if you're dramatizing the story of somebody um, that wasn't like all over the place and dramatic, then a lot of times you really do have to bring more drama to it. You have to find the conflict and bring that out. And so that also is, it's just a really good thing in general. You have to keep saying, okay, is the conflict compelling enough here? So we're going to skip some of the true life stuff there. Um, but you see already there's, just pages and pages of thinking and comments. This was an initial outline that she did, um, which had a lot of really good ideas and materials in it. Um, it ultimately, I put it aside to start writing, but it had a lot of good stuff, and we had a lot of really strong conversations out of that. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing screens if I can figure out how to do that seamlessly here. Um, Zoom has kind of moved some stuff around, and it's not the most helpful. When you've been on a platform for 5 years and all of a sudden they start moving stuff around, that's kind of a pain. Um, but so there was a lot of digging into what was important to her about the story before we got into things. But I think the other thing that's really important and would be easy to, kind of miss in all of this is you, a musical's so involved and so big that in a lot of ways you need some sort of collaborator. So it might be that um, you're writing the music, somebody else is writing the book and lyrics, or you're writing the book and lyrics, somebody else is writing the music, or maybe you're writing the book and they're writing music and lyrics. Whatever it is, um, I've got a collaborator that I love working with where we're both pretty much writing everything. I mean, I do the actual typing of the book of the musical, and I make him do the actual notation of the music, just because he's a little faster at it than I am at this point. But we could either one of us do everything, but it's gotten to be really fun because we can both do each of it. So we just kind of, it's kind of like McCartney and Lennon are credited with the composing of the songs and lyrics, the music and lyrics, even though it might have been heavier one or the other on certain numbers. So we write that way. But I think it's really important to have people to sound things out with, to work through things, because I think that a musical is a little, I think it's very unusual for it to be one person's vision, and to have that work because it's so big And in the end, it's going to be dependent on other people bringing it to life. I mean, unless you're doing a one person musical where you're the band, you're going to have other people involved. So it's, I think, really helpful to get them involved sooner. And when you look even at Hamilton and then Manuel Miranda, he had collaborators uh, doing various things. He had a director he was working with. He had a music director who he was working with. So there was a team to work through things. To me, that doesn't take anything away from Lin Manuel's accomplishment. But if you're setting out to write a musical like that, you really do need to have a realistic sense of how hard it is to do it one on one. I think you have to at least have a dramaturg or a coach or somebody to support you with it because it's really a lot. Um, so yes, this document that I was just showing you is actually somewhere it tells me how many pages it is. It's long. Um, and no script writing, no lyrics. Um, there's some links and stuff, so there's some stuff that goes elsewhere. So there's all kinds of it's a um, pretty involved document. And that was just an initial brainstorming document. We brainstormed an outline. Then we kind of all commented on it. We brainstormed locations and possibilities. And one of the things I do, this is a little thing, might be really useful to you though, is I will, when I add sections to a document, I add them at the top, not at the bottom, and try and date stamp everything and add some comments so that it's clear. But if I'm adding the new material at the top, then when I open the document back up, I'm looking at the newest material. I'm not scrolling to the end and trying to figure out where that starts. Um, the bookmark feature that both Google Docs and Word have is really useful now too. But that's just to kind of give you a little idea of the brainstorming that went into it. And we spent weeks doing that before I did, kind of a proper outline and dramatic structure. And I'll talk about that more in upcoming videos. All right. Thanks for watching.